How's it going? I'm Tomlin's not back. Thanks for checking in again. This is day 227, 365 days towards racial change. I am here just going through a year-long project, self-study, examining myself, challenging myself on issues of blackness in America. You know, discovering new paradigms, new ways of looking at the issue, finding ways to educate myself. Oh, to come move beyond above my present experience as a black person in America. There's a whole lot to talk about. We got plenty of material. We got centuries, 400 or 500 years of this to talk about with a lot of fireworks and good high points in there. So we're never at a loss for words on the subject. I'm concerned about the black mind, um, how black people understand, get along, live, um, have a better sense idea of their space and place in America. I'm concerned about the white mind, the privilege, expectation of favor um, in America and the world at large. Very important things to think about. Um, concerned about financial literacy, especially among black folks. We understand. I've just got done reading a book. I think his name is Edward G. Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Read it through, immediately opened it back up and read it. I'm reading it again because the ideas in there make your hair stand on end if you get your head around what he's talking about finances. But it was last night, while I was at work, I understood his financial argument. He's got a couple refrains through that book. One of them is for us to understand inflation as a hidden tax. And just inflation means that my dollar does less and less work as time goes on. Its power is being eroded over time. And it's just interesting to see it at work, see it happening in my life, and how things are transpiring in the world. I got a raise at work, but when the wages increase, so do prices, and you got to understand prices increase. It's not a one-to-one ratio. My wage goes up a point, but inflation is going to go up a point plus a few decimal places out. It's going to erode. It's going to erode my dollar. Something to think about. Financial literacy, understanding, that after all's said and done, I'm doing everything financially correct that I can. I'm earning my own money, keeping my own living space, and all this, taking care of myself, buying my own clothes, and even in light and saving, in light of doing all those things correctly, there's this other monster, financial monster in America that still has some control over my wallet. Financial literacy, very important. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He wrote 3 great works. I've read these and we referenced these. Today, again, we are in the Black History Reader in the introduction. Last purpose for the book, Reparations Argument today. Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America. Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #us2 symbol. Black women conversing, coming together, having their support and their conversation there. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, or a Black Facebook experience. If you can't find your flavor anywhere on the World Wide Web, then do what I did. Start your own little blog or video things. Everybody's doing it. You gotta unburden yourself with these exercises like this. And finally, we also have at 365 days towards racial change, story time. Uncle Tom's Cabin just came out of an extended time in there, and so we'll be getting back to that very shortly. Got into also deep into a lot of material this year, and it doesn't look like I'm going to finish the way I want it, but we're going to finish that book, definitely. Just having our conversation there. All right, today we're talking about Dr. Anderson's third purpose of his book, A Black History Reader, is the reparations argument. Very important part, and I'm glad he stuck that in there, because after we get done with the constitution-based reasons for the fixed economic relationship between whites and blacks in America, it's fixed. As blacks move up, whites go up. It's fixed. Unfortunately, when blacks lose ground, whites don't really lose that much ground. But when blacks are moving up, whites definitely are working to make adjustments in there. That's the first purpose, to understand the Constitution basis. We talked about James Madison's notes and all that, and how the conversations and the text is kind of scrubbed and sanitized with hardly a mention to black folks, Negroes, slaves, anywhere in the Constitution, not until you get to the 13th, 14th Amendments. And even there, it's massaged and very friendly to the public and the international community at large. Second purpose was our exceptionality. He's demonstrating, look, blacks are, not only have we survived this domestic terrorism against us, not only survive, but we thrive in it. We produce, we contribute, participate in warfare, give our lives, give innovations, push art forward, sports forward, things like that. Dominating in any area that we can have consistent access. We don't necessarily dominate maybe in a sport that calls for a colder atmosphere or whatever, because it's an extreme financial investment, different for white folks. So that's going on. What we got here is some things to really consider as far as black exceptionality, to participate more effectively, better than our white counterparts, but still be cordoned off, segregated, given poor resources, things like that, and to still make it happen, make it work. That's an exceptional person that does that. And today is the reparations argument. Now, the reparation argument is, it's compensation for those years of abuse, free labor, and such, families torn apart and all that. Dr. Anderson points out a couple reasons. Now, me, I've never been beaten for not working or compelled to work or anything. I just have to live on the street if I want to lay around, right? And there's a space for that too. I can attest to that. But the reparations is more because you see the white families who held slaves, and let's just even leave it right there. Those white families that could have slaves and all that. Well, that wealth just gets passed on and compounded for generations to those white folks who are wise with that capital and all that, from generation to generation. Well, the disadvantaged black people, victims of that wealth creation, well, they inherit um, uh, the lack of dignity, lack of respect, lack of wealth, lack of resources from generation to generation. You know. So, somewhere, now I know that my father's side of the family, uh, we had slaves. If I do my ancestry or whatever, you better find some slaves because that is the loose oral tradition of my people on my father's side. Yeah, slaves, right? Um, so I've inherited to a degree uh, that kind of American dysfunction, uh, that a slave institution. I'm a recipient of the downside of that because of the color of my skin. Right? Whatever white folks owned my ancestors as property and whatnot, you know, I'm sure some of them are recipients into perpetuity of those resources, that capital generated from the free labor of my ancestors. So that's a very important uh, thing, piece of the argument, because some of the pushback is, well, white folks say, well, I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, you didn't do anything. All you did was step into the blessing of your ancestors, coercing a segment of the American society to um, work for you, enrich your ancestors, fill their bank accounts, secure their control in America. You just kind of when all the smoke cleared and all that, you just put us out, and we were at the mercy of a well-established white institution in America. You let us loose in an institution created by whites, for whites, administered by whites. It's interesting now that I think of it with the debates on the floor in 1787 when James Madison is taking notes. They're talking about black people a lot, especially through August. There's a lot of conversation, and it's like they're making so many decisions and all this stuff, and there's no black representation whatsoever. Ain't a black person in the room, and they're making all these judgments and keeping themselves well in position. It's only later, 1865, Congressman Thaddeus Stevens, you know, he frames Dr. Anderson in this book. I'm going to talk about this in a couple days in his book, Powernomics. He says the congressman frames civil rights as an economic matter, And that's what I love about Dr. Anderson's work. There's emotion in there and stuff, morality, but we can extract all that, put that to the side for now, and just think about how, let's just look at history and facts, which is the purpose of his book, one of the purposes of his book, A Black History Reader. Congressman says in 1865 that it's an economic issue. And he says, the black people, look, they need to be slaves or free. If free, then they're going to need some economic compensation and a way to generate wealth, just as us white folks did. Now it's interesting, they had just got done coercing a whole nation of black people to work for them. That was their plan. You know, his plan is, okay, let's give them 40 acres, a mule, and $100. That mule that's the only workforce he's providing, but I guess you want to start somewhere. It's interesting. They didn't propose giving us some bodies to uh, encourage some success and wealth creation in the land, but it's not a bad start. 40 acres, a mule, $100, get us on their way. Now, on that note, I will say back then, you got numerous examples of jealous whites burning, poisoning, lynching, being very resistant to seeing black folks doing better than them. Some of those black folks did get right on with the system uh, and have more and did better maybe than the poor whites around them. Bad, it's the right thing to do, but for the times and whatnot, it fueled the hatred from white folks. That's another discussion. Let's say we kind of live in a Disneyland after slavery, and the 40 acres, mule, $100 is a good thing and sustainable. That's a very good aspect. Unfortunately, it never became an institution and all that. And I also want to add that missing from that is education, proper education, because the slave only knew so much. You had a few outliers that did. Maybe they were close to how the master kept books, ran the business, ran the plantation, sustained that business entity in the land. They probably learned from that and tried to forward that in the nation. I would say that the common black person, the backbreaker out in the field, probably did not have that mindset, the discipline to sustain a kind of a business-like, sustainable atmosphere for these reparations. The reparations didn't come off. It wasn't a big institution. It wasn't a sweeping thing in the nation. It was just a good proposal, an idea. It's interesting to read some of James Madison's notes from 1787. Some of the you can see some of the men, white men there, did have a mind to say, our discussions around black folks and all that, but this community that we've created will need some help to recover, discover themselves, be competitive, and all that. Those comments are few, guaranteed, but James Madison does jot down some of that, some of those concerns in 1787. So the argument's real. Every once in a while in the news cycle, you'll have so far I've only seen black reporters indicate some concern or some interest in black reparations. But it's very few. It's not easily recognizable. When they do present it, you might see it for that week, maybe a day the next week, but it's not a popular topic, especially at this point. It's one of those things, the earlier you catch it, the more sustainable it becomes. But bloodlines are blended. Who's defined as black? Do we have records? So implementation of reparations is a problem for people, but it'd be nice to show some favors, carve out real land, you know, find some way. I forgot to do my research to get the what that would look like. Excuse me. In inflation terms, this $100, 40 acres, it'd probably be equivalent to a small town by now, at least. The mule would be a herd, but it'd be tractors and real machines and stuff. So our reparations, it's important. I think it's a real necessity still. It'd be nice to see some favor and equality in business dealings. The one way, this comes back to Dr. Anderson's thought about being black people being put in a protected class. If there was a explicit overt banner to designate black people with this need and how America will treat them in the future, that would go a long way, I think. Let's facilitate. What I'm talking is affirmative action here, of course, but I'd like to see affirmative action happen and stick and be a real thing. Excuse me, in the land. So that's one of Dr. Anderson's points. I agree with that. You're going to get pushback and stuff, more bureaucracy, debates, and all this stuff. But America needs to make this stuff happen. One of my personal convictions is that these ills and curses in our land is because America is so apathetic towards doing what's right with expediency. I mean, black people are just one. We're a big chunk of population being owed by America, but think about it. See, if America would have an attitude of strengthening their own, of transparency, of equitability with everybody, this would be a different nation. But it's not. I think there's too many. For me, I think there's way too many foreign influence. That's another thing that may be holding up reparations. What do immigrant communities care about an indigenous community seeking some compensation for its past treatment in the land? The immigrant community knows nothing about that. So we've got a lot to do. We've got a lot to work on. It's one of those things, I think I put it in the brief notes, if you either, reparations argument is something you're either there or not. If you need a whole lot of explanation of why black people should be compensated for unpaid labor, torn apart families, being cast forth in the nation without any education, then you got it. Then your journey's long, and I would turn blue trying to convince you. But if it's up here and in here in your heart now, then um, you come a long way in understanding the reparations argument. I'm not going to hold you hostage today, but that's an important part there in Dr. Anderson's book. So, if you get a Black History reader, read the introduction and you'll see three main purposes: constitutional-based reason for the fixed relationship between blacks and whites, the need to recognize exceptionality, and the reparations argument. And in those 101 questions, he gives a lot of great historical and factual proofs in support of all three of those purposes. I'm Tom Nyback. Thanks for hanging out with me. 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.